Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It has gone 6 o'clock, so we will make a start. So welcome to the Cabinet meeting tonight, and welcome to our new assistant in the committee services. I hope you enjoy it, and it isn't as long as last night at the planning committee. So you did have a bit of a trial by fire last night, and I'll promise that you won't be here until 10:30 tonight. So. But indeed, welcome to everyone of the first meeting of the Cabinet this municipal year, and it's nice to see everyone here again. So we'll begin with the evacuation procedure. Everyone present knows what the evacuation procedure is, so I don't propose to go over that. That moves us on to item 2, which is apologies. I'm aware of 2 apologies, that Councillor Golby is away, and we've had apologies from Councillor Watkins as well as an observer from the opposition. That leads us on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest beyond those printed on the agenda? No? Okay. That leads me to agenda item number... Oh, sorry, Councillor Guttridge.
Thank you, Leader. Item 6, I would declare a pecuniary interest, and I will leave the room when it's discussed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guttridge, and I think that's noted. That moves us on to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes. Is everyone happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record? Yep. That leads us on to agenda item number 5, which is public consultation. There are no members of the public present. So we will move on to agenda item 6, which is the Borough Plan Review, the Preferred Options Consultation. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to recommend to the committee, to the Cabinet, to endorse the draft plan for the purpose of public consultation. Cabinet will recall that an additional public consultation was added to the Borough Plan Review. The purpose of this consultation was to provide members of the public with the opportunity to engage in an emerging version of the plan and provide the opportunity to influence the next phase of the plan, which is the publication version. At this point, this is an emerging document, and there are some gaps in the information, such as infrastructure needs and viability testing of sites and policies. This work is required for a publication version, but getting a plan out for the early comment provides the opportunity for the public to have a meaningful role in the development of the final plan. At this stage, the plan's been informed by some evidence, although more evidence is required for the plan to be considered final. Particular evidence of note is the Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment, which has been prepared by a CNE to identify a proposed level of growth. The level of growth identifies a need for housing and employment over the plan period. The draft plan then identifies a suite of sites to meet this need. Cabinet should be aware that this need is solely for Nuneaton and Bedworth at the moment, and there will be a requirement for a joint evidence base of the wider Coventry and Warwickshire area to be reviewed, which will be based on the up-to-date census information when it's available. This authority has a brownfield site first policy, so site allocations that are proposed do not result in any greenbelt release and are aligned with the National Planning Policy Framework. Finally, the draft plan includes a set of proposed policies which, when adopted, will be used by the planning application and applicants and assessed by the Development Control Team as part of their determination process. So I propose this as per printed in your document.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Markham, thank you. Any non-Cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Condacore.
Thank you, Chair. We had a discussion about this obviously 2 days ago at the Borough Plan Committee, and it's unfortunate that they're all crammed into the same week. But there was a few useful things said, including Councillor Smith's commitment to actually do various things on the consultation, including having a themed consultation, because I believe it's useful if people want to talk on this particular subject to have that sort of input. But also there's a lot going wrong. The big thing, and it was in your manifesto, to actually not to scrap the agreement with Coventry, and also an immediate review of the Labour's unfair plan. And this is quite a slow review, so it may have started fairly immediately, but it's not going at anything like the speed we need it to. So it won't be useful for everyone. And one of the other things we discussed on Tuesday was to have a Delta document, because this is a very big piece of work, and we've got the borough plan, and we really need to see what's changed rather than reading through hundreds of pages. And so I think the officers had agreed to do a Delta document, and I think that would be very important, because actually we need to talk about what's changed as one of the key issues. And finally, I really want to mention, is it worth it? Because there's a whole area that's just marked as rural. There's some out to the west of Bulkington, there's Bedworth Woodlands, there's parts to the north of Weddington and the west of Weddington. They're just marked as rural on the map. And although you spoke about Greenbelt first, Greenbelt last and Brownfield first, the rural areas aren't really defined in the plan or given any protection. So I think that's an area that people will be very worried about. Yeah, people may be very great, oh, our bit's not in an allocated site anymore, but the rural areas don't actually have any planning protection per se. The census is also coming out on the 28th of June, and hopefully that will show Coventry's population maybe 10, maybe 20 or even 30,000 less than it's supposed to be in the projections. So hopefully that will give us some relief, but I am very fearful about whether this is going to generate a real protection for the countryside, and also a real fear that actually we write a nice document, and I put my borough plan on the desk last night at planning, and we don't actually use the policies. We have a policy in the plan of 15% modal shift. That is a very good policy, so when we build a new estate, we put in bus services and cycle routes, and for Weddington, we put in a station entrance maybe to get in more people to use the railways. But that's just ignored when we come to planning meetings because of the greater good of the development. So I do hope if you are committing to do a new borough plan, you will actually give the policies some teeth and actually apply them when we actually look at planning applications. Because I can speak at length at a planning meeting, when they want to chop down the trees. I can say, well, policy SA1 or HS1 or HS2 says protect the natural environment that you've already got. But actually, when it comes to planning, that just seems to get ignored. So I do hope we rapidly do a plan. We look at the housing numbers and make it sensible. But actually, we also need a commitment to use the plan. Otherwise, it's not worth the paper and the hundreds of thousands of pounds to produce it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just to come back on a couple of those points, I will agree with you that the meeting on Monday was useful, and we are taking on board the suggestions of a Delta document and themed social media type activity. In terms of Greenbelt, Greenbelt is defined. That's not something we do. And rural is rural. It's not because we've made it rural, and it doesn't get the same protection as Greenbelt. However, as an authority, we have Brownfield First policy, so we won't take any pushback from Coventry or anyone else on that, and we certainly will not use our Greenbelt for other people's housing. With regards to the planned speed, you've got to appreciate, you said it yourself just now, that the census figures won't be out till the end of June. They then have to be analysed. We then have to talk to our neighbours. So there are lots of things outside of our control. And the amount of work that's gone on in the last year to present such a huge document, review all those policies and come up with a first glance that the public can actually comment on and help shape to the publication version, I think the officers have done an outstanding job. And far from going slow, I've seen how hard they've worked to move this on really quickly. So I won't take any flack on the speed of this production of the plan. And I'm looking forward to hopefully getting it completed on time and submitted to the inspector, hopefully by about February next year.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'd just like to pick up likewise on a couple of points, because it seems like if we were to listen to Councillor Condacor, it's the Ministry of Misinformation going on. So let's address the issue of the immediate review for a start off. When the inspector signed off the borough plan as it was then in 2019, he said that we needed to start ASAP because we needed it reviewed by 2023 at the latest, I think it said in the report from memory. And yet the previous council did nothing for its remainder of its period of office. And as Councillor Smith has already just said, getting to this point is a monumental piece of work. We have done a consultation, part to analyse that, refined proposals, put in a non-statutory consultation so we can actually keep listening to residents' views, and actually done a call for sites and evaluated a number of those sites, all in less than 12 months. I think that is a remarkable achievement, and I think Councillor Condacor should hang his head in shame, actually, criticising officers for the speed at which they've been going, and the fact that we know that we are understaffed, particularly in planning policy areas, and to get to this stage, despite the constraints of the resource in the department, I think is a testament to the hard work of that team. And comments on social media from certain councillors who have already spoken but not from Cabinet, that this isn't a bad authority to work for, it's a corrupt authority, does nothing to help the actual recruitment of hard-working, decent, intelligent and capable officers to fill the vacancies that we have. And secondly, in respect to the Memoranda of Understanding, Councillor Condacor knows very well that during the period of the current borough plan as it stands, the inspector signed off that Memorandum of Understanding. We cannot change that. The motion that we passed at full council last year was quite explicit, that it says that any further reviews will not agree to the current Memoranda of Understanding in terms of how we deal with any potential Coventry overspill. So what we have done deliberately as an authority is say, no, we will not have any green belt being developed on, and that is a conscious decision so that we can check and challenge Coventry in their long overdue review of their own borough plan, their own local plan. And as I said last night at planning, I find it galling that the leader of the Labour Council in Coventry attacks a planning application in Bedworth for the number of developments when it is his own local plan which has forced us to have so many houses as it currently stands. I think that is outrageous. But if we also look at the numbers, we can see that at the moment on the current proposed revision, it is for 646 dwellings per annum, or thereabouts, and we are currently supposed to have about 800 dwellings per annum under the current iteration of the borough plan. I make that a 154 dwellings per year reduction under this borough plan. We said we would look at reducing the housing numbers, and we have reduced the housing numbers. And over the 15 years of this plan, from 2024 to 2039, that will equate to just over 2,300 houses less that we would have to build. That is a significant reduction compared to Labour's borough plan, and I congratulate Councillor Smith and the team that he leads for getting us to that position. Now, we still have a way to go because, as Councillor Smith said, we have the census figures to come out. But I believe it is moving in the right direction, and I think that that team should be congratulated, and I hope that the Chief Exec, and I can see that the Director is also here, will pass on my thanks and the thanks of Cabinet for getting it to this position, because it has been a remarkable transition. So I think we have something which is well worth putting out to public consultation, and I look forward to hearing what comes back from residents. Any other member have anything they wish to say? No? In which case we will move to the vote. All in favour of the recommendations, please show. That is carried. Thank you very much. If someone would kindly collect Councillor Guttridge. Thank you very much. So that moves us on to agenda item number 7, which is the Arbory Design Code. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to recommend to Cabinet that the Arbory Design Code supplementary planning document now be taken forward to adoption at full council. To remind Cabinet with the context, we were one of just 14 local planning authorities that were granted pilot status to test out the government's National Model Design Code. This is now being rolled out at other local planning authorities right across the country. The pilot status and outputs and draft SPD have been reported to the Borough Plan Committee in some detail. Consultation was undertaken during the winter on the draft SPD and produced a range of responses from stakeholders and interested parties. Some changes are proposed to the SPD, and these are detailed in your report. If Cabinet are happy with the document as proposed, it will next go to full council to be adopted, and at this point it would become a material consideration as part of any future planning application. So I propose this as printed in your report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith. I know if Councillor Golby were here, she would be happy to second that, but in her absence, does anyone? Councillor Markham, thank you. Any non-Cabinet member? I've got Councillor Condacord and Councillor Kenner.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's nice reading a design guide. Yeah, they're actually very valuable documents, so we actually get a bit more cohesion in what's going forward in an area. And whilst there's not a lot necessarily wrong with the design guide, actually the main thing is wrong that we aren't actually applying this type of stuff to all the other sites in Weddington, in Bulkington and in Bedworth, because it includes things that are appointed to developers and allows us to shape the planning applications. It's interesting it has things like 10% net biodiversity gain, which is the sort of thing we desperately need to be doing. And I was told it cost about £50,000 to do this exercise. And I really do not understand why some of the large strategic sites haven't also got a requirement for this type of exercise to be done. And if a site, I mean, I think the top farm is about £100 million uplift in value. The Arbory estate, yeah, there'll be 50 million or there'll be a lot of money increase in the value of that land for getting planning permission. And so I think somehow we need to get the developers to be paying effectively to generate some of these design guides, either through planning fees or whatever. I don't know what the planning fees are on the Arbory estate. But yeah, the money should be coming from the developers to actually make sure they provide us with good development. And so I asked the Cabinet to look at getting more of this type of work done and actually making sure, even if it's not a formal design guide, that other developments take note of the general layout and the general feel that we want as a borough. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Condacord. Councillor Kenner.
Thank you, Leader. I've been following this design guide as it's been coming through the Borough Plan Committee, and I think it's a truly exciting piece of work that's been coming through. I mean, we have to thank the government first for their stamp of approval with being awarded pilot status and their money to help pay for the guide. So it's a bit strange that... Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Kenner. Any member wish to come back? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, we should be truly proud of this piece of work, enabled by the government, but the team worked really hard to make sure it was a thorough piece of work that really stood up. And there were a lot of lessons learnt, and I think this is something we can take forward. I don't think we can necessarily produce it as a policy on every development, but the lessons learnt certainly will transfer into some developments. And in the future, I think there is a way we can look forward to maybe coming up with some sort of policies based around this. But times are busy, we have limited resource and we have a borough plan to produce. So once we've got that tucked out of the way, this is something we will be looking at for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I know that when this came to us beforehand, we did say at Cabinet that we would look at a lessons learned exercise to see what we could do, and I would very much echo that we do that, because whilst we don't necessarily have the resource in the department, as I outlined earlier, to do design codes for every single strategic housing allocation, I think there are things that we could learn, and then once we've got the borough plan review done and underway, we could look at further supplementary documents to help with some of those areas in due course. But we have to remember that this was funded by the government. This was extra, not within our own budget, and we don't have that funding. And trying to get it from planning fees is just not feasible. We know that planning fees do not cover the full cost recovery of what it takes to analyse an application site, particularly the larger application sites. We wish that it were. And planning fees are actually capped by legislation by the government. So we are restricted on that, but I would welcome the part in the Levelling Up Bill which actually says that planning fees will be uprated as part of that piece of legislation. So the 25% or 35%, I can't remember which way around it is. I think one's for major and one's for minors. So that will also help, and it's a recognition that times are changing and that planning departments do need a bit more assistance in terms of dealing with some of these issues. So I think that is to be welcomed. In terms of the Arbory Design Guide, I think it should be all guns blazing and let's get it passed and to council. So without further ado, can we have a show of hands in favour, please? Thank you. That is carried. That then moves us on to the Gypsy and Traveller Site Allocations Development Plan Document Publication. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. This is my final one tonight, I think. So to give Cabinet some background, the Gypsy and Traveller Development Plan Document, or DPD, has now gone through various stages, including an initial call for sites, issues and options document, and associated public and statutory consultations, all of which has culminated in the final publication version, which is on page 65 of your agenda. This was finally consulted upon at the beginning of this year, and the responses have led to a few suggested, mainly minor modifications. All of this will now need to be considered on examination by the Planning Inspectorate because it is a development plan document. The purpose of the report is to brief Cabinet on the responses to the Gypsy and Traveller publication document and the subsequent minor modifications that the policy team are suggesting to the DPD in view of these responses. In addition, the second purpose of the report is to seek approval so that the DPD and supporting documents and minor modifications can be approved for the Council to submit to the Secretary of State via the Planning Inspectorate in June. I would also request that delegated authority be given to the Head of Planning and Building Control in consultation with myself as the Cabinet Member for Planning and Regulation to make any minor amendments as the Inspector may deem necessary in order to enable the DPD to be adopted by Cabinet within the earliest time frame. I propose this as set out in the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith, and I will second that from the Chair. Is there any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacourt.
I'll be brief. I mean, it's very useful to have this. It will help us a lot with applications that are in inappropriate locations. There's a few comments about the A5 site, which is in my ward, about highway impact, etc. And I think that it's never been a busy site as it is, and the housing or the travellers currently at the back end of the site, which is actually in Leicestershire. So I don't think it's a major issue, but obviously it needs enough space, maybe the gate's moving back, so if it becomes more actively used. The other thing I wanted to mention was the Stocking Forward site, which is right next to the proposed location for a new railway station. And although that might be many years off, I think we need to recognise, maybe in the wording or the plan, that we may one day need to provide an alternative site for those. I think they show people in Stocking Forward, Whittleford, so that space could be used for maybe a station car park. So one wouldn't want to make the station not have enough parking because there is a inability to actually relocate the traveller and show people there, obviously appropriately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Any other member? No? In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations? That is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 9, which is the Transforming Bedworth Cross-Party Working Group. And that is mine, and I will move the recommendations as printed. And it is purely because there are now no other Labour members from Bedworth on the council. So in my view, it would be inappropriate for there to be a seat from Labour on there, and then it should be represented by Bedworth councillors. I'm only on there by virtue of my portfolio, and indeed when I was Leader of the Opposition and was entitled to a seat, I delegated that to a Bedworth member because I felt it was entirely appropriate that it should be a Bedworth member from my group, as it was at the time, to feed into the working group. So I will move the recommendations as printed. Does that receive a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Markham. Any other non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've picked this off the back, which is the Transforming Nuneaton nice brochure and things. And it's really important, these transformation schemes, that we see where's going. And it's important that these working groups actually have quite a wide-ranging debate. So I understand that all the voting members would have to be Conservative, but I do think it's important in terms of having a debate and not being an echo chamber, that actually the working party does have some non-voting people, either from other parties or maybe even independent people who aren't actually part of the political scene. Because otherwise I don't think ideas will be challenged, refined, etc. I'm sure you consider me a pain in the backside most of the time. And I'm not suggesting that I'm the right person or even the Greens have got any right to be represented on it. But I think you do need someone on there to be a bit of a critical friend and asking questions. And if it's a group of all 6 Conservative councillors, 3 from the county and 3 from the borough, I don't think that working group will be as effective. And secondly, I think we need to also see, if there's no non-Conservatives on it, what's going on. Because, I mean, you may moan at various things being said, but actually in a vacuum, it is very hard to know what's going on. So I think if you are making it an all-Conservative working group, I think the Cabinet and the scrutiny committees should actually have more of a regular feedback in terms of progress. And maybe this working group could actually provide more feedback to the scrutiny OSPs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. My reply to that would simply be that anything which requires a final decision would end up coming to Cabinet and, if necessary, full council. The working parties are not a decision-making body. They are advisory only, and if necessary, when it comes to making a decision, then they can be questioned and interrogated at the appropriate decision-making body. But I fundamentally believe that those who are actually on that working group, unless they are not from the area but have a position of responsibility or authority, they should actually be from the area it is aiming to improve and update and regenerate. So, any other member wish to speak? No? In which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to the Borough Council visual identity. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. I fortunately do not have responsibility for the borough plan. It's Councillor Smith's job. I shall move the report under item 10 in my name, and I shall take a few moments, if that's all right with you, to talk about it, because it's already attracted some interest with our friends in the press and in the social media circles. So anybody who's listening, I'll put on record what our reasoning is for this proposal. So what it is the very first step in a process to refresh the council's visual identity, which is an awful piece of corporate jargon, which basically means we want to change the council's branding. Why do we want to do this? Well, because the borough and the borough council are going to be so involved in such a huge programme of transformation and regeneration over the next few years, we want to make sure that our public-facing element is as professional and attractive as possible. And the arguments against the existing setup, there are two arguments really. The first is the argument of quality, which is that the existing branding for the council, if I'm perfectly honest, Leader, isn't very good. Not due to anybody's particular fault, who particularly works for the authority now, but it's not hugely attractive, and it's not, for example, our corporate colours appear to be a very garish shade of lime green, which is not the most attractive prospect to potential partners. Leaf green's fine, but you know it's not green at the moment. And the other reason is distinctiveness. So members and officers and members of the public may be interested to hear that quite recently I think it was a marketing consultant, did an exercise where he ranked every single council logo in the country, and Leader will be able to tell us exactly where Nuneaton and Bedworth came in the ranking. But about half of council logos in the country were just the council's crest and the council's name next to it, which is all very well as far as it goes, but it's not very distinctive. It wouldn't put Nuneaton and Bedworth on the map. So those are the reasons for changing the existing setup. And on the crest, because this has been a matter of some controversy, I will point out to anybody who is listening that we are keeping it. We couldn't get rid of it even if we wanted to. It is the crest of this borough, it is part of our heritage, it is on the letters patent, and it will be on our documents. What we are looking to change at the moment is the council's logo, the logo of the organisation. And an example of this is that the county of Warwickshire has a very fine crest, but Warwickshire County Council has a very distinctive logo, which is the bear and the post, and everybody knows when it's got the county council's stamp on it. The fourth point I was going to make on this is the issue of cost, because I think that's the first response that a lot of people would have to this, which is why are you spending money on this sort of thing for? Well, I can reveal, and I will emphasise, that this design work has been done in-house. All it has cost us is officer time, partly because I wouldn't have signed off that cost anyway, because I'm a fairly tight sort of fellow, but also because there's the danger of if you do take these things out to external marketing consultants, they're not very good usually very often when they come back, as you and I have experience of on another matter, Leader. So we didn't want to spend money, send it out, and then get stuck with something because we'd spent money on it. So the example that always comes to mind is the London 2012 Olympics logo, which they spent their millions on, and it came back and it looked like something lewd. So it's being done in-house, and we couldn't stop we couldn't stop our marketing officers producing nice graphics even if we wanted to. So we might as well put them to good use. So as for the logo we are proposing, the reasoning behind it, and it was quite difficult to find something symbolic of the council and the borough as a whole, because you can do some abstract turn on the letters, or you can do some abstract symbol or something, but that's not hugely exciting. What we thought was the best way to go within the cabinet or within the officer discussions was the town hall, because it is the symbol of democratic government of this council. It's not because it's a building within Nuneaton, it's because this is where the elected body of this borough meets. And that was our reasoning for it. So what I'd like to emphasise, Leader, is that this is the first part in a broader change. What we are going to take out to consultation from today is just the proposed logo, and I've already had quite a lot of feedback on it. The colour is simply, it's a holding colour. I'm not doing subliminal messaging. It may not end up being this colour as part of the final product. But what I would appeal to the public and to members and to officers actually is to respond to the consultation that we're starting today, because we want it, because we're doing it in-house and because we're doing this project piecemeal, we wanted to go out to consultation as early as possible rather than just presenting it to people and say, this is what you get. and get as much feedback as possible so we can get a good final product. So for the next 20 years, people don't turn to us and say, well, why did you stick that thing in? So I've already had some feedback, which I'll be feeding back to the marketing officers. And if the public could act as a focus group for us and give us their thoughts, we'd be most grateful. But I shall move the report, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft, and I will second that from the chair. Councillor Croft alluded to a survey and that I would have the results, and I can confirm what the results of that survey were because I looked them up. And someone who has far more time than I do evaluated 402 council logos across the United Kingdom. And out of 402, Nuneaton and Bedworth ranked at 383rd. And I don't think that's a statement of where we are as a borough, as a country. I think that's more of a statement of what our logo looks like. And it has to be said, I think our logo is actually from the 1970s, if I remember rightly. Certainly, the corporate historical memory seems to think it goes back that far. We can't identify another one. But another problem with it is that logo actually doesn't actually say who we are. It just says Nuneaton and Bedworth. That could be Nuneaton and Bedworth Cats Home for all anyone would know. Most councils actually say they are a borough council or a county council or a district council or a parish council. I don't think he was actually sad enough to go into town and parish councils logos. He just stuck to the upper and lower tier and unitary authorities. But one of the things which has also preempted this is that when we are going out, and in my role as the portfolio holder, to try and actually get people interested in Nuneaton and Bedworth and investing in Nuneaton and Bedworth and wanting to help with the regeneration, one of the things that I get asked is, well, what is your message? What is it that you are trying to sell and put out there to the wider public? And why should we come and invest in you? And they ask, well, what is your identity? And this is what they have come back with, and they have said, actually, we don't think that there is enough of a branding there to actually put you on our map or on our radar. And I think that's very sad that for the sake of a logo, we may have doors closed in our face. So let's actually try something different. We aren't wedded to this particular design. We are actually looking at this is an idea which has come up, and we will listen to feedback which comes back. And if there is a better way of doing it, then we will listen. But that is the reasoning behind it. And it's not quite Eurovision scale low on the scoreboard, although we did do this well this year for a change. But it is still quite sad that we are that far down the rankings. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Thank you. It's quite a good idea having the council building as a logo, because it is sort of where we are. One thing I want to pick up from Councillor Croft said is the colour's not fixed. I'm not sure if it's not useful to give people some guidance in the consultation or comments on it as to whether it has to be all one colour. Are we just varying the colour, or could we have these beautiful orangey red bricks as the colour of the top part of the logo and the tealy blue as the bottom part? I don't know if in terms of logos it needs to be the same colour, but Nuneaton has always been a massive brick making place through a lot of history. Stockingford and all those areas had all the brickworks, and I think maybe some of that, and obviously I'd like a bit of a green roof or a bit of grass in there, but that might be going a bit too far. But I do think having something like the bricks emphasised, I think would be really good, because it does tie back to a big part of our history. Thank you. Oh, one more thing, just if we apply it to vans and things, it's always useful to keep the vans white with a logo on, so they're easy to resell and take the logos off. So don't go for any garish colours when we actually start branding our vehicles. It's easier to have a logo on the vehicle, but actually keep the background as much white as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. I think that's an idea that we can take away to officers, and he's more than welcome to submit that as part of the formal consultation as well. Councillor Condacor did remind me about something I forgot, and it was to do with the vans. Well, it's not just the vans actually, but the livery and everything else that goes with it, because I think that has been a concern of some residents who have emailed me about the cost of changing our logos on all our vans and our letterheads and our agendas and everything. And the idea behind it is that we will replace them as and when they are needed. The crest isn't going anywhere, as Councillor Croft said. It is still a perfectly valid and legal symbol of the council. And if a van is still going, we're not going to spend however much it costs to change the livery on it. We will wait until that van needs decommissioning and replacing, and then change accordingly. And of course, the letterheads and everything, that is just quickly changed by a click of a mouse on a computer screen and also on the website. So there is no additional cost there. It is quite simple. We just change our templates on the computer system. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. Very briefly, the only point I'll make is that we haven't got as far as the colour scheme, that sort of thing yet. This is just the logo design. Because we're doing it in-house, we're going to do it as piecemeal as possible so we don't commit ourselves to too much before we can do the work, but we shall certainly take those ideas away.
Councillor Gutteridge, put them.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like just to inform Mr Condacore, Councillor Condacore, that all the council wagons are white and the vans, our contractors' vans, are a different green. Also, I fully support the logo idea. We need to move on to be a professional outfit, which we are, and it will help us when we go out into corporate events, and I fully support this. And when he says about the grass, we cut the grass, so we don't need to have it on the emblem. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gutteridge. Any other member? No, in which case we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 11, which is the quarterly review of the Strategic Performance Report. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Leader. I should be very brief on this one. I should just move the report as written and highlight a couple of good points. As usual, the Revs and Bens and the accounts payable team are doing sterling work, making sure that council tax collection and benefit payments are going through at a high rate and that we're paying our suppliers on time. There are areas for improvement in terms of our HR metrics, but I can confirm that our HR team will be bringing those to the Employment Committee, where we'll be able to identify the culprits, shall we say, and ensure that this behaviour doesn't continue. So I shall move the report, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacore.
Thank you. On the positive aspects page, which is 140, it mentioned our recycling rate at 30.22%. I really don't see that as a positive when modern councils are looking at 50 to 70% recycling. And one of the things actually in your manifesto was actually to improve recycling rates. So I think these rates go back to when the green bin charges were introduced and we saw a loss of composting under the Labour administration. I do think we need to work harder to actually try and recover some of that damage and get that recycling rate up. So I think the target of 33 to 40% is actually third division. I think one of the things we could do is look at where we can actually start to win on the recycling. So I want to make that point. Agency spend is obviously ridiculously high, and there's obviously lots of good reasons for that with COVID and staff shortages, but I think that's an area that we should be picking up through scrutiny. And on the comments about long-term absence and absences, I think it would be useful to have some metrics a bit more on some of the data behind that, because obviously COVID has damaged the health of lots of people. There's lots of stress and lots of things, but there's also a lot of people obviously aren't genuinely ill or whatever. So, but I think particularly with the issues of long COVID and things, I think it is better to have a bit of a delve into that before we actually make comments on it and actually see what's going on with our absent rate, etc. Obviously, there's a lot going well. I mean, I don't actually praise the new administration much because that's not my job. But yeah, looking at the actions and descriptions, yeah, some things are progressing well. But we also need to keep an eye on things like the Church Road Stocking Forward project, which seems to be a bit of a unplanned thing we need to have a bit more scrutiny on. But I say it's sort of a mixed report card, and I hope it will go through scrutiny and get more examined. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacore. Any member? No? In which case we will move to the recommendation, which is to note the report. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. That moves us on to item 12, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. I haven't received any. Item 13, any other items? There are no any other items I have been made aware of, which moves us to item 14, which is the exclusion of the public and press. Under section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item: it being likely that there would be a disclosure of exempt information of the description specified in paragraphs 1 and 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Act. So I'm happy to move that from the Chair. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Croft. Can I ask that the live stream be ended, please?